Some of you have participated in some of the conferences that we've had here. Some of you have had the benefit of some personal sessions in Innate Health. But I think we need to articulate its premises with greater clarity. I think we need for the Twitter community to recognize that it is safe, that it is consistent with Torah Hashkafa. And I believe that tonight we can at least begin on that journey. I don't believe that we will get near completing it. There may be some of you who will be disappointed in the fact that we may not get back past more than one fundamental premise. But there's no way that we can get to step 2 without first having clarity about step 1. Much of this will be very self-evident and simplistic. Much of it will appear to you to be unnecessary. All the same, I think we need to go over the landscape and make sure that we've dotted all our I's and crossed all of our T's, and that we move incrementally from one level to the next, from one principle to the next. This is called seeking the high ground. Torah strategies for acquiring a healthy disposition. Physically, we know what that looks like. We know a healthy disposition is someone who physically is, he's got his body's in balance, he's strong, he's energetic, he's capable of dealing with stress on a physical level. He's someone who can heal quickly from injury, who is more resistant to infection. He's got a good immune system, and basically someone who is free of pain. They're in good shape. Their body is under their full command. They can run when they want to, they can jump when they want to, and they're agile and they're free. I don't think anybody would ask anybody else, why would you want to be physically in a healthy disposition? It seems very simple and very evident. Nonetheless, there are a lot of people who don't. We have lots of bad habits. We don't eat the right things, we don't exercise, we live very sedentary lives. We perhaps don't sleep enough. We become worn out, fatigued, and we experience all kinds of diminutions in our ability to resist infection. Our immune system goes down. We get colds. We get all kinds of flus and whatnot. Nonetheless, it's fair to say that if you were to ask anybody theoretically what they would want to do, they would say they would want to be very robust and very healthy, because it's the nature of life to choose life, and life that we would want to choose would be life in its most vital form, life at its fullest. We can tell who's healthy and who's not healthy. More or less, when we meet somebody, we can tell if they look energetic, if they have this healthy look about them. Sometimes we can tell when people are guilty of abusing, eating the wrong things, or excessive in their eating habits, too much sugar, too much whatever, nash. But we know that a person, when they're full of life and they're vibrant, when they're energetic, we know that they are people who are reasonably healthy. And if we know their history, that they don't catch cold, and that they go through our seasons without succumbing to illness, we know that they're in good shape. It's much the same with emotional well-being. It's much the same if you were to ask somebody, why would you want to have a healthy emotional disposition? What would that look like? What does a healthy emotional disposition look like? So I think it would be someone who we know is emotionally strong, emotionally energetic, somebody who can deal effectively with stress, a coper. Someone who's a coper. Life throws at us lots of stuff. We're constantly dealing with wave after wave that challenges our integrity. Someone who is free of emotional pain. Now, what does that mean, we're free of emotional pain? There's lots of expressions. People who are free of self-deprecation, feelings of inferiority, and low self-esteem, and people who are free of excessive guilt, people who don't anger quickly, people who get over offenses, who get over insults quickly. They don't carry grudges. They don't carry around ill feelings towards others. So we know more or less what a healthy disposition looks like. A healthy disposition is not one that's full of all kinds of anxieties. And I think all of us are drawn to wanting to be someone who has that kind of a disposition. Nonetheless, people don't, for many reasons, don't choose to be emotionally healthy. In much the same way that people neglect the kinds of things that would make them physically healthy, people neglect the things that make them emotionally healthy. And because of the fact that we don't do things the way that would contribute to our being in a state of vital, energetic, emotional well-being, we begin to lose touch. We are not immune. We lose our ability to heal quickly. We don't get over insults of one sort or another to our psyche quickly. Because of the fact that our immune system is down, we are very suspicious. We become very, very suspicious about people's motives, about what they're trying to do. We become distrustful. Well, we begin slowly to drift into states of hypersensitivity, isolation. We develop all kinds of unnatural appetites. This thing is annoying. So despite the fact that all of us want to be emotionally healthy, we don't choose to be emotionally healthy. We maybe wish to be emotionally healthy, but we don't choose it. And in much the same way that it requires exercise and discipline to be physically healthy, it requires exercise and discipline to be emotionally healthy. And that's what we need to talk about in the session today and in the future sessions that we'll have on this topic. Just as you can tell somebody who's physically healthy, you can tell somebody who's emotionally healthy. They radiate. They're joyful. They have peace of mind. They're people who are capable of loving. They're generous. They're charitable. They're understanding. They're empathic. They're copers. They know they can meet challenges without falling apart. They have equanimity. We can tell the people who are emotionally healthy. So somewhere, some of us, many of us, have developed bad habits. We've developed injured emotional states of being. And because we've not addressed those, and in many instances we've really catered to them and we've allowed them to become exaggerated, they take over our lives and they begin to corrupt and destroy the quality of our lives. And we're talking about the fact that the offshoots of not being able to be in a state of emotional well-being is something that can spread its tentacles and suffocate the quality of almost everything in our lives, so that what we could enjoy and what we could experience to the fullest become very, very attenuated, very eviscerated. So I think it goes without saying that we should choose life. We should, and v'chad v'chaim means, I've given you life, but I've also given you goodness. So we need to choose to experience the pleasure, the goodness. So in pursuing that, it would seem self-evident that you don't have to encourage anybody, but the Torah nonetheless tells you, you should choose it. It's a choice. And it's not only the fact that we should have this natural proclivity, but it's obligatory. If we are Torah Jews, it's obligatory. It's obligatory because the Teichacha, which we'll read in Parshas Kisavai, tells us that all of these horrific consequences that are described in this rebuke are a product of the fact of Tachas Asher Le'avadat Hashem Elokecha B'simchu V'tuv Leivav Mirev Kol, that this happened. You know why? Because you didn't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu joyfully out of the blessings that He gave you. And there are people, many, who have many blessings and don't see them and can't enjoy them, and are morose and unhappy and depressed and all kinds of nasty stuff. And the Pasuk exhorts us, Yivdus Hashem b'simcha, that we're supposed to be b'simcha. And all of the Sfom HaKadoshim tell us that one of the most precious of all of the midos that we can acquire, a primary objective of being a Torah Jew is simcha. They tell us that all of the great madregas, all of the great insights, all of the great information which was passed on through the generations from the Ari HaKodesh, who had an unprecedented revelation of the most abstruse kinds of secrets, came because he lived with joy. He had this amazing ability to live joyfully. So tonight we're going to talk about the beginning, the yesod, the foundation of being able to live joyfully. How it is that we have the resources to live joyfully. I do want to point out that while I believe Innate Health is a very valuable tool for many, if not most things, in the normal course of the challenges in our lives and in our disposition, that there are many instances in which it's not the only answer. That there are times when it is necessary to appeal to psychotropic drugs, pharmaceuticals for intervention. There are some very severe kinds of emotional states which require different kinds of intervention. There are some very severe kinds of abuse that can take place in formative times in the lives of children that live with them in a way that it's very, very difficult for them to get beyond them. But even in the cases where one does need to appeal to another medium in order to overcome it, innate health is still a valuable tool. It adds a great deal of quality to whatever else is happening and whatever else is working. So regardless of whether it is the only exclusive tool, and for many things it is exclusively and alone capable of giving us a tremendous boost, it's invariably an asset to whatever else we're doing. So I'd like to start out with a premise which I believe is absolutely essential to how we understand one of the first principles of innate health. That premise begins with the fact that creation is a product of God's goodness. Rabbi Michel Twerski is Hatoiv HaSholem. He is the perfectly good person, the perfectly good entity. God says there's nothing bad that comes from you. Rabbi Michel Twerski's intention, Rabbi Michel Twerski's plan, his agenda for the world is goodness, tainuk, pleasure, enjoyment, joy. And as such, even the presence of evil is something that is there for a reason that would give us a source of pride, a source of achievement, and that we have overcome obstacles, that we have met challenges, and that we've done so with integrity, and that we can feel very, very confident and tall by virtue of the fact that we are capable of defining ourselves in an exalted way. That's a pasuk right at the beginning of creation. After the 6 days of creation, Hashem looks over his world, a world which includes evil. And he says the world is very good. This is a very good world. And our sages comment, it's good. That's the Yetzer HaTov, good inclination. Tov Minyoid, that's very good. That includes the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is what makes the world very good, because it gives us the opportunity to be victorious, to be triumphant, to take credit for what we make of ourselves. And consequently, when we're going to be talking about innate health, we're going to be talking about the fact that we have the resources to make the kinds of choices which give us a proprietorship, which put us in control of our lives, which give us a command of the quality of our lives. The world that Hashem created is a beautiful world. Before Adam and Chava made their fateful error, it was a perfect world. And even after, it still is a beautiful world and still offers us all the opportunities that are necessary to enjoy life. The world was pulsating with life, with the opportunities and pleasure. It was a joyful world. It was a world that was full of blessing, of bracha. We are told that the Rabbi Michel, when he created the world, that the blueprint of the world was Torah, meaning that everything that he created out of Torah. Torah is Toiv. Plus, refers to the Torah as a source of that kind of goodness, that kind of integrity. The blueprint of the world is Torah, and that means that every molecule of the universe, from the smallest particle, the smallest atom, the smallest proton or neutron or whatever is the tiniest little thing, quark, to the greatest galaxy in the universe. Everything is created with the predicate, with the yesod of everything, the fundamental polarity of everything is joyful, positive, good. It's there for mankind to be a beneficiary of Hashem's goodness. That also means that all of the sciences, which are a description of the world, which are mankind's attempt to understand the world, at least the phenomenological world, the world that's open to our examination, the corporeal world, empirical world, that all of that is created with the blueprint of Torah. In other words, Torah is everywhere. And as these sciences proceed, and as they develop, the conclusions that they reach are conclusions that a discerning mind, a great mind, would be able to find in Torah. And there were, in fact, great minds who were able to find in Torah many of the sciences: mathematics, astronomy, physics, chemistry, psychology. But here we need to make a very important distinction. Science describes the appearances of the world. In other words, there's a world which presents itself to us in a physical way, and that's the outer crust of creation. And the wisdoms that bring so much order and so much discipline to all of the empirical world are inherent in Torah. To that extent, Chazal tell us, it's a Medrash in Echa, someone will tell you, Yesh Chachma B'Goyim, there is wisdom amongst the nations. Tami, you can't believe them. There is wisdom amongst the nations. If they'll tell you, Yesh Torah B'Goyim, I'll talk. They tell you that the nations have Torah. That you can dismiss. But there is Chachma B'Goyim. And those Chachmas are not inconsistent with Torah, but rather are inherent in Torah. What lies beneath the crust, what makes up the inner workings, the energy of the entire universe, which is not immediately discernible to the eye, which we would call panemius, the innermost energy, is Torah. It's the Ratzon of Hashem, Hashem's will. That's what drives everything. Hashem's will drives everything. So that should lead us to several conclusions. Conclusion number one is that all accurate sciences are part of Torah. Somebody will tell you that we cannot somehow trust information because it comes from a non-Torah source, something which has been said about innate health, for example, then that's simply not fair. To the extent that innate health does represent principles that do work, that are effective, that have been proven over time, then we can trust the fact that this is not something which is at odds with Torah, but is really something that we can find in Torah. And we do. You find virtually every one of the principles in one or another part of Torah. We can find the principles of innate health supported in the Sfarim HaKadoshim. They're there. They're not necessarily there in the same, brought together in the same organized fashion that we would find them in innate health, but they're there, and for those people who have organized minds, they can easily cull the literature and bring those things together in a way in which would demonstrate the fact that they're supported by Torah. To the extent that there are conclusions which innate health reaches, which are inconsistent with Torah, that conflict with Torah, we can dismiss them. It doesn't mean that we have to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are, in fact, certain conclusions which those people who are the champions and advocates of the prophets of innate health promulgate, which are inconsistent with it. And we can talk about that at some future date. That does not in any which way dismiss the greater body of that which is very useful and very effective and resonates with our sense of what the Torah wants of us and what's true. So if somebody tells you that they're unhappy with where innate health leads one, and they may be right, then it's because they're allowing something that does not coincide with Torah to become part of the approach that they're using. We need to be discerning, and we need to understand that there's much that we can use and that we must use. I want to tell you why we should take this innate health approach seriously. Over time, I think many of us will be able to confirm this experience, if not with ourselves, and certainly amongst the people that we know. Number one, there is a fair amount of unhappiness, if not the kind of destructive unhappiness which destroys the quality of people's lives altogether, but there's this running through people's lives. There's a good deal of sadness. People have unhappy marriages. People have unhappy relationships with their children or with their parents. People have unhappy relationships with their friends. And worst of all, people have very unhappy relationships with themselves. And even where there's nothing really demonstrably pathologic going on, but I think there is a widespread phenomenon of a lack of joy, a lack of excitement, a lack of vibrancy. I think there's a very noticeable sense of irritability. There's no peace of mind. People are not at peace with themselves. And that's not the way Hashem wants it. It's definitely not the kind of natural state which Hashem dreamed of when he put Adam and Chava into Gan Eden, and certainly not what he would want for his children. So I think it obliges us to say to ourselves that the quality of life, which is really the concern over here, because we're not really talking, again, we're not talking about people who are struggling with with more profound forms of emotional unwellness. I'm talking about the majority of the people who we view as being completely normal, conventional, but there's something missing. There's no buoyancy. There's no excitement. We kind of plod through life, pushing time. And I found generally, and I believe again, many of you will be able to confirm this, that the majority of therapeutic intervention, I mean, again, we're not going into the fact that certain psychopharmaceutical agents are extremely helpful and can make dramatic changes, but by and large, when people go in with marriages that are failing, or people are going in a great deal of individual or personal pain, that takes a long time, if it's going to help. And when it does help, it doesn't seem to help entirely. It helps a little bit. It makes things more tolerable. But I don't think we ever reach the point where we bounce out of this relationship feeling that somebody has just given us a breath of fresh air and now we're alive. We become dependent on our therapists. There, we kind of put them in charge. We hold them responsible for our well-being. And that's not a terribly useful or healthy relationship. I think that we have found that we don't have enough people who we believe are truly effective to be able to make referrals to, and that it just seems that it takes forever. And for years, it seemed to me that there had to be a better answer. I found that the quality of life in the frum world was losing its integrity in epidemic proportions. That we were seeing more and more unhappiness in marriages, more and more unhappiness with people and themselves. There was a whole lot more sadness and depression and hopelessness and despair, and just people who were kind of empty of life. So I didn't think that the answer was necessarily going to be to recommend that people be in therapy forever. Not only does it take so long, but it's also terribly expensive. And its efficacy was always questionable, and a lot depended on how inspired the therapist was. So I was always hoping that there was going to be a magic bullet. Now, there really is no magic bullet, but there is in this innate health a lot of things that are very attractive. Number one, it's simple. It's so simple that sometimes you scratch your head and you say, it can't be that this is really a theory or that this is an approach to make people healthier, because it's just too simple. But it is simple, and it appeals to common sense, because it addresses things at a very fundamental level, and in very logical and reasonable ways. It's easy to use. Once you kind of pick up the principles, it's very, very easy to use. You don't need to pick up the phone every other minute and figure out whether or not you're going in the right direction. There are indications whether or not that you can pick up on your own that you're going in the right direction. And it works fairly quickly. If you catch on, it can work in a session. It can work in 15 minutes. Most people, it takes a while to kind of get used, because it does kind of revolutionize the way you look at the world. So it takes a while to kind of catch on, but once you catch on, it works very quickly. It's durable. It really does last. Again, if you're invested in the principles, and we can deal with it prophylactically. We don't have to wait for something to go wrong. We can get together, small groups, large groups, and we can talk about how we can plug into these principles in a way which will help us build a strong immune system, a very strong, emotionally intact resistance to the kinds of insults that frequently begin to destroy our joy in life, our emotional integrity. And we can train people to teach this in fairly large numbers. This does not require a PhD. It requires people who have common sense and people who can articulate the principles with the simplicity that they deserve, in a very compelling and logical way. So we may be able to get out there and do things prophylactically which will help us increase the well-being of our communities, and the well-being of our families, and the well-being of our person. So I'm going to start out with one basic principle, and that's going to be the one thing that I really want to cover today. The principle number one. Excuse me. Principle number one is that there is something out there, an energy, which they call by various names. It could be called mind, could be called formless energy, could be called wisdom, and some people will even be so bold as to call it God. But there is some sort of very pure, positive energy out there, which is the fundamental resource for innate health. And again, I just want to remind you that we're talking about the fact that the world is created by a creator who is perfectly good, whose energy sustains the universe, whose energy suffuses the universe, and that it's imperative, and perforce we have to recognize that kind of constructive, positive energy is out there everywhere we turn. And we have to learn how to mine it, how we can draw it. The principle suggests the following, that each one of us has access to this resource, a resource which is wise, which is pure, which is healthy, which is informative, which is inspiring, which is joyful, which is peaceful, which can offer us direction and counsel and guidance if we know how to get in touch with it. The 12-step program would tell you that that's the higher power. And most religions would suggest that that refers to divine energy. We might perhaps give it a point of reference with us that we have within us. Something of the divine, we call that a neshama, a nefesh eliki. We have a divine soul within us, and that's a real presence, and that we can use it to inform us of what's right, what's not right. It's important that we know that this energy is immanent, meaning it's inside of us, but that in essence it's a universal energy. It's out there and is connective. That is, that it really brings the world together, coalesces everything in the world into one harmonious whole, something that will be evident at the end of time when Hashem the Melech al Kol Haaretz, when Hashem will be clearly the exclusive sovereign of the world, then everything, we'll see that everything is suffused with this divine energy. I really don't want to get into the particulars of this point, but in different ways this energy is available to both Jews and non-Jews in very different ways. But it is important that we, as members of this Am Kodesh, understand that our access to this energy is far, far greater than that which is accessible to the rest of the world. That doesn't mean that it's not effective elsewhere. It is effective, and it's been demonstrated to be effective. But we have something which can be much more transformative in our case because of the fact that the intimacy of that power with us, of that energy with us, is much more intense. People have said, okay, if that's the case, then why do we need a Torah? If we have this divine energy inside of us, so then why couldn't we consult it to find out what is right and what is wrong in all of the instances in our lives? So I would like to make it very clear about where this particular energy is usable and where we can apply it. Hypothetically or theoretically, if someone might reach a state of prophecy, I suppose we might be able to argue that they would then also have insight into all of the aspects that we find articulated in the psukim of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. But we are not prophetic. We haven't had prophecy ever since the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That is not something which we can even really talk about on any kind of a practical level. Here's where we can't appeal to this divine energy. We cannot use it to inform us whether something is kosher or not kosher. We can't say, I feel this is kosher. Some housewives sometimes will call me after they've just made a very festive meal and discovered that they've used the wrong kind of frying pan or pot, and they're in a state of desperation. And Rabbi, it's got to be kosher. As strong as that feeling may be, it's not the best criteria. We can't use it to tell us what is a malacha on Shabbos or what's not a malacha on Shabbos. Whether something is a reshus harabim or is a reshus hayochid, whether it's a private domain or a public domain, whether the eruv is good or is not good, or what's considered cooking and what's not cooking. That's not what Innate Health is good. We can't use it to tell us whether our mezuzahs are kosher. Who's an expert has to examine the mezuzah and tell us whether the letters are all there and whether they're formed correctly. We cannot use it to inform us whether or not the speech that we are using is acceptable, whether it's Lashon Hara or not. There's a Shulchan Aruch. You got to look into it. Is this Lashon Hara? Is it not Lashon Hara? Is it Rechilus or is it not Rechilus? Is this acceptable, an acceptable discipline of speech, or is it not? We cannot use it to tell us which marriages are acceptable. People will tell me all the time, this has to be right because I'm in love. And that's not the criterion that we would use, even though one would say, but my innate health tells me that this is my soulmate. Obviously, their innate health is not in the right place. Um, in sum, it's not the kind of thing that one can use when there is a Shulchan Aruch. It's not the kind of thing that we can use as a substitute for Torah and mitzvahs. That's not the proper locus of innate health. However, I think it's fair to say that in the mitzvahs that we perform and in the choices that we make relative to Torah mitzvahs, that innate health can be a very welcome addition. It can increase our experience with a mitzvah. It can increase our joy with a bracha. It's something that can offer us greater quality, even though it can't tell us what's right and what's wrong. It can give us a much richer experience as we either do what the Torah exhorts us to do or resist from doing what the Torah would have us do. Where it is legitimate to appeal to this innate health and to the principle of wisdom or divine energy, whatever we want to call it, are non-halachic issues, the kinds of things that really probably make up the majority of our day. Feelings of self-deprecation or low self-esteem. How do we handle failure? How do we handle losses? God should protect all of us. Losses of loved ones, loss of parnasa, loss of a job, loss of a marriage. These are all tremendous challenges to our integrity, and they not infrequently destroy people's lives. And it's certainly the case that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to be able to respond effectively and to restore our joy in life, despite the fact that our lives have changed dramatically. We all have times when we're not in we're not in a good place with our mood. We've gotten off what they say, we got off on the left side of the bed. How do we relate to criticism? How do we deal with it? Sometimes we can deal with it better because it's delivered in nicer ways, but we need to be able to deal with the fact that criticism can be helpful, and that it depends on how we welcome it and how we accept it. When most frequently what we do when people criticize us is that we begin to dislike the person who's, we shoot the messenger. How do we deal with jealousy and envy? Many of us feel that other people have things that really we deserve, and that if we don't have them, that somehow is something that it becomes a commentary on the fact that our lives are empty or they're not as rich as they could be. So sometimes it's helpful to have a person, a good friend that you can talk to, and they'll help you through it. Sometimes it's good to have a counselor or a therapist to talk to. Sometimes it's good to have a rabbi or a rebbitzin to confide in. And if those relationships are empathic and caring, and supportive, and full of common sense, then they are usually very helpful. But we don't always, we don't live with an in-house rabbi or rebbitzin. We don't live with an in-house counselor or therapist. And we don't always have access to people who we really think can be helpful to us. And in a certain sense, innate health really offers us the integrity and the pride of being independent. It doesn't dismiss the necessity from time to time to counsel with someone or to confide in someone, not at all. But it does mean that we need to know that we are that we are capable, that we are competent, that in the majority of the kinds of things that happen on a day-to-day basis, that we have the flexibility, we have the elasticity to be able to find the positive and to roll with it, and to come up smiling, and to come up with a very strong positive energy. So the issue is not using Innate Health for Shulchan instead of the Shulchan Aruch. There's a place for the Shulchan Aruch, there's a place for a posek, for a Meilei Law, there's a place for a rabbi, there's a place for a counselor, there's a place for a therapist. But on a more general basis, if we want to be in a good place emotionally, vibrant, joyful, positive, to have peace of mind, to feel that we're capable of coping, that is the kind of thing for which Innate Health is very, very useful. And I'm hoping that in the next session or two that I'll be able to demonstrate and articulate how we can access this positive energy and use it to become people who have that kind of resilience and who have that kind of enthusiasm, positivity. How do we know that we need this? How do we know when we need it? So basically, it's kind of the kind of thing that we can discern from the way we feel. If we feel sullen, we feel irritable. Again, I'm not talking about the fact that this is everybody has hours when they're irritable, but if this becomes sort of an adjective of who we are, if the people who are closest to us feel that we've become bitter or resentful, or that we're irritable, that we're angry, perhaps people feel that we're envious or jealous, or we feel envious or jealous. It's a symptom, it's a sign. To us, it's an indication. This is not a healthy response. Envy and jealousy is an indication, it's a symptom of a deep-seated unwellness. And it should alert us that it's not just that thing. Like any symptom, every good physician will tell you that you want to look for not just that symptom, you want to find out what drives the symptom. And it could be far more general and far more extensive than just envy or jealousy. It could be something which has become very corrosive of the person's emotional well-being as a whole. If we feel vindictive, or we walk around bearing grudges, I can't begin to tell you how many people, myself included, bear a grudge. We carry around old wounds and old hurts that people have inflicted that we have not forgiven. And as it has been observed, that somebody who bears a grudge is giving an enemy free rent in their head. They're allowing somebody to complicate their lives, to weaken their ability to be fully in any moment because of the fact that they're wasting all of this energy on sustaining this vindictiveness or this grudge. There are people, and amongst us, again, it depends on the extent who see the world negatively, are pessimists. My father, blessed memory, had an older brother, my uncle Nochem, a wonderful, wonderful person, and a very gifted person. He was about 9 years older than my father, and he would come to visit. In those days when he used to travel by ship, in the 1940s, he would come to visit. My father was a very positive person. He was, you could just look into his eyes and you saw joy. My uncle Nochem walked around, and his popular refrain was, Setegnet, Kinderlach Setegnet. My father used to say, Kinderlach Lebedik. And my uncle used to say, Kinderlach, it's not good. It's not good. He used to talk about, it's not good. Nothing, everything held for him some sort of foreboding. But if we're pessimistic, if we're hopeless, if we see things as being dark, if we think that people don't think well of us, we make attributions, negative attributions to people. Again, in a sustained way, if much of the time we're sad or listless, much of the time we kind of lack a sense of wanting to run out and shake life. If we're indecisive, we find it hard to make decisions. Those are all symptoms. And symptoms of the fact that we lack of confidence, or we lack the integrity to address life. If we are hurtful to our loved ones, if they don't welcome our presence in the house, when we come in, they kind of run for the different rooms in the house. If we feel alone, isolated, if we feel that we have no friends, nobody loves us, everybody hates us, we'll sit in the corner and eat worms. If we find ourselves drawn to excessive kinds of things like alcohol, drugs, overeating, pornography, any of those things, if we're drawn to fill some void inside of us because we're desperate to feel alive, some young people do cutting. They cut themselves. And when you ask them why are they cutting themselves, it's because that's when they feel alive, when they hurt. But it's a symptom. It's a symptom of the fact that something is going on which is an expression of our not being well. If we sabotage ourselves, we sabotage ourselves at work. We sabotage ourselves in school. We sabotage our relationships. I've counseled many young men and women who, when they go out on their dates, they get very enthused, they're into their fourth date and it's looking very good, and then they do something which destroys the relationship. You say to them, well, why did you say that? Or why did you do that? Well, we don't really know, but it's a pattern, and people sabotage themselves in some very serious ways, and they don't allow themselves to be successful. People who feel an enormous sense of stress or pressure, and they're always working under this sense that their lives are stressful. All of these, all I'm saying to you is that these are indications, these are symptoms of the fact that we need to step out of the space that we're in. We have to step into a healthy space. We need to access healthy energy. We need to integrate for ourselves an identity which is positive, which is life affirmative, which feels entitled to enjoy, to be successful, that feels strong and competent to deal with the stresses of life. Shlomo Melech in Koheles says, Asher Holikim, Asher Osa Holikim Es Ha'odom Yosher. He says, God made man Yosher. Yosher is, strictly speaking, would be straight. But it really means God made man health, him integrity, gave him positivity. Yashrus is a state of being, which is not distorted, not twisted, and not contorted, and not obstructed. And the pasuk concludes, "Vehema bikshu cheshbonos rabim." God made man straight, and man just went off and created all kinds of confusion. God invested us with the ability to connect with this healthy energy, with this divine goodness, and we've distorted. We've made it very, very difficult for us to process it because we made the lens so dirty and so twisted that the world comes in and is digested by an organism that's not healthy. In Tehillim, we say it every Friday night in the davening, we say, Oyo Zerol HaTzadik, that God planted light for the righteous. Ule Yishrei Leiv, and to those who are straight of heart, those who have integrity of heart, Simcha, there's joy. What we want to be able to learn how to do is to be Yishrei Leiv. We want to have a straight heart. We want to learn how we can think clearly, how we can think straight, how we can dismiss the cheshbonos rabim, the confusion and the cacophony of voices that make us reach contaminated conclusions, to make decisions that are not constructive. So, all of our Sifrei Kodesh tell us that the key to drawing success to us, whether it's success in relationships, whether it's success in the world of our families, whether it's success in the world of finances, is simcha. It's joy. Positive. That we're positive people. Positive people are like a magnet. It draws all of the healthy energy in the universe to the person who is happy. So people want to do business with somebody who's positive, who's got that kind of energy. And people want to be in the company of someone who's got that kind of energy. And we ourselves can be at peace with ourselves and feel strong and equipped to meet the stresses of our lives when we have that kind of joy. And conversely, if we're unhappy, if we're depressed, if we're sullen, if we're down, we draw negative energy. People don't, they say laugh, and everybody laughs with you, and you cry alone. That's an expression of what this form tells us. People who are negative are the kind of people that don't have that kind of magnetism. People don't feel drawn to it. So they feel they feel abandoned. When they feel abandoned, they feel worse, and when they feel worse, there's even fewer people who want to be with them. It's a cycle that reinforces itself. But even in a mystical way, negativity draws negativity. So it draws failure and it draws unhappiness. So what we would like to be able to do in the next session or two is to learn how we can access this positivity, how we can find that the conduit where we can align ourselves with this positive energy. And while it's not the only answer, but it is a very powerful answer to much of what could add a great deal of quality to our lives, and ultimately, I think, enable us to begin to experience the kind of joy that we've longed to have. So, in Mitzvah Hashem, I hope to spend some time with you in the very near future, perhaps next week or the second week, and talk about the approach, how we can dismantle the barriers between ourselves, our thinking, and be able to mine this very, very precious resource that all of us have access to, and it's because of the fact that we're B'nai Yisrael, we have a much, much greater access than the multitudes who have had success with the positive energy, which is a universal gift. But we have an even richer treasure, and it's really wasteful of us not to be able to appeal to it and use it. So Yirtzeh Hashem, in the future, I hope to be able to share that with you, and we'll move on to step 2.
Sure. Thank you.